Hi everybody, I've stopped off with Mike from Firelock Games to have a bit of a chat about the design philosophy within Firelock Games. So, Mike, I've actually got a few questions to ask you here. Some of the stuff that some of the boys in the office and me myself have been wondering about.
Okay.
So, first question is, what attracted you to the idea of doing a pirate game?
Well, that's an easy one. I've always been a fan of pirate stuff. Like since I was a little kid. I think I was like maybe one of my first or second like Halloween costumes.
Yeah.
I had my mom make me a little pirate costume. But always a fascination with pirates, with the sea, with ships, things like that. And then as I got older, got more interested in the reality, right, of it, and the history and how they came to be, how they fought, the tactics, this and that. And that kind of led to a broader interest in colonial history and 17th and 18th century history. And then I played a game called Legends of the High Seas. It's now out of print. It's a pretty fun game. And that was my first introduction to wargaming with pirates. And I was like, this is great.
Yeah.
So when that went out, when GW Historical pulled out of all those things, I was like, man, I hope somebody makes another game at some point. And then one thing led to another, and I was just like, maybe I'll try my hand at this and see if we can make a game. And then here we are.
Yeah. Now, the way you've actually went for your game, it's more of the actual history of it rather than the romanticized version. I'm guessing that's a very deliberate thing?
Definitely, yeah. I feel like that's something that's been done a lot, is the Hollywood pirates or the the zombies and skeletons and all those types of things. There's lots of games. There's lots of board games and even some miniatures games, lots of stuff that kind of cover that. So we wanted to give it a true... Nobody's ever approached pirates historically, with the exception of maybe historians, from what I've seen, right? And even there, you get a lot of liberties and a lot of people kind of just trying to, sell books, essentially. And that's been happening since the 18th century. Pirates have always had... people have always had a weird fascination with them. And a lot of times they'll just kind of tweak the reality to try to sell more books or make it more popular, which I feel isn't necessary, because some of the stories are just amazing and incredible. They're real. So,
all right, very cool. All right, well, so you've decided to make a pirate game. Let's actually start talking process. So, whenever you guys first started out, what was the first thing you guys did when you decided, right, we're actually going to do this? What was the first port of call for you, if you'll excuse the pun?
Yeah. So it was more along the lines of I decided I was going to do the game. I was just on my own, right? It was spurred by a trip to St. Augustine in Florida, seeing the forts and all the historical stuff, the Pirate Museum, all that. And I just started working on it little by little whenever I had free time. Then showed it to my buddy at the game store, Alex, and he was like, this is great. He had a lot of good business experience and stuff, said he always wanted to start a game company. One thing led to another, and he's just like, let's try to produce this game. And that's led to the creation of Firelock Games, and led us to where we are now. And that was, and then we literally knew nothing. I like to tell the story where day two, like the first day, we're like, all right, let's do this. So day two is like, all right, we sit down, start figuring this out. Our first step, we go onto Google and we just type in how to make miniatures. And that's, we just went from there and just tried to figure it out. And then little by little pieced it all together, bought the stuff, started, and then, finally learned how to do it.
So you've had the game out there in the wild for a while now. You've now just done No Peace Beyond the Line. It was the first expansion to the game, yeah?
Right.
So the next question would be for the process is, whenever you come to actually create new miniatures, new units and stuff, design-wise, where do you have to actually start with that? Because you've got a lot of stuff to go from there. You've got a big chunk of the Caribbean, North America. Yeah. So where do you start looking?
We bit off a little more than we could chew on that one, I think. But as you'll see if you have the book, the new expansion book, I mean, I forgot the actual number, but it's definitely way above 20 factions that we added. There's a lot of new factions. So the goal of this most recent book, we just said, let's put everything in there. Yeah. Let's just get all the stuff, make one kind of, if you want to play the 17th century, this is the book, you need to play it. And If I'm honest with you, I don't know if we'll do that again.
Okay.
With the next centuries, it ended up being quite the project, and we really didn't end up doing everything we wanted even still. So
really,
you'll probably see some, because it's so diverse. There's just so many things, and you start to get through. It's like, oh, I can do this and I can do that.
Yeah.
But
rabbit hole.
Yeah, but we got the important things. We got the big major ones, and we tried to cover them to some degree at least.
Yeah.
So all the ones we'd actually make models for, the ones we really focused on, made sure they had plenty of options, and they have their own nationalities and factions. Mm-hmm. And does that answer the question, or did I run on?
I think we segued there for a second.
Yeah, I do that a lot.
Yeah. What I'm really wanting to drive at is the design process. So let's say you were coming to make book 3, right? Mm-hmm. You've decided you're going to put a new character or a new unit in there. Mm-hmm. For the design process, where do you start and where do you end with that?
Pretty much what catches my interest. If I start researching, reading, and looking at different sources. I talk to Benderson Little a lot, who's our historical consultant. He's always brings up kind of obscure, interesting, crazy things that I find out about. And it's just kind of what piques my interest, and I'll start going from there. And typically that turns into a bit of a rabbit hole, because once you start, all right, I'm going to focus on these guys who are interesting, and then but they also fought these guys at one point, and then these guys are kind of cool too, and look at all the guys who fought these guys, and then it just kind of goes from there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's say you've picked your unit. Mm-hmm. You now need to actually turn that into a miniature.
Right.
So what's your next step?
So if we're going to make miniatures of something, first thing I'm going to do is obviously look for some kind of description of what they look like.
Yeah.
Not always the easiest thing, especially in the 17th century. So a lot of times it's literally just based on written accounts, right? So it's a written account of what they look like. Got to try to piece that together. So we'll get that description. If we have images, we'll use those. We'll give it to our concept artist. Mm-hmm. Concept artist will sketch something basic up, give it back to me. I run it by Benderson. We talk about it. We make any changes we need to make. And then once that's done, then we'll do a full set of 4. And then again, we'll review that, go back to the sculptor. Review that, then give it back to the artist when we're ready to go with it, and then give it to the sculptor, and he starts sculpting it.
And then the research process for that for your historian. I mean, is there a single source he goes to, or is he out touring around museums?
He's already done a lot of the research, thankfully. So that's why he's great, because he's like a human encyclopedia on the subject.
I see.
Yeah, so he's he'll just be like, oh yeah, I remember it's in this thing. And he'll pull it up and we'll review it. And but yeah, that's typically how it'll go. He's kind of just has the knowledge most of the time, and if he doesn't, we'll spend some time. We'll look it up, and we'll try to find the best things we can.
So that must be a fun part of actually searching through all the historical documents.
One specific one where we just couldn't figure out the answer, right, was we originally were going to put bayonets on all of our regular soldiers, because the French would carry bayonets. We know that a lot of them had early bayonets really early on, like in the 1660s. And then, so we're trying to figure out where would they carry these things. So we're looking at an Osprey book, and they've got it on the baldric, hanging down. We're like, so he's tried that, right? So he'll get stuff and he'll put it on himself, run around, and he was Navy SEAL, so he understands practical concept. He's like, this would never work. This is not gonna work. So they probably had the same problem we had, where they're like, where the hell would they put these things? So just like, let's draw it here, it'll work. So we went and we just figured out, and we just decided, we'll leave it off, we'll make it a separate piece for later, and then people just put it where they want it. So, and that's the plan for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose if you can't actually figure out where it's to go, I mean, I'm sure there's probably some obscure, like, one line in a document somewhere that says, oh yeah, and they had it here.
Right, exactly.
But hunting that down must be a real challenge. All right, so let's say you've got your new unit of, say, French militiamen just made. Let's just, for an example.
Right.
Next thing is you're going to have to start putting them down onto the tabletop. So you're going to have to start figuring out rules and equipment that they would have used and how that would work within the game and not make them incredibly unbalanced. Sorry, thinking natives. Bows and arrows everywhere. Oh, God. So what are the steps for that? I mean, do you compare them to maybe a similar unit from another faction you've already done? Or if it's something brand new, do you literally just start experimenting? I
typically just go, if they're really similar to something else, I might use that as a base and say, okay, well, it might be different here or there. But typically I just do it from scratch. I kind of look at accounts, and if there's no accounts, I'll try to just kind of base it based off where they're at, who they're fighting, what they're going to focus on, nationality traits that are kind of like stereotypical, and just start building from there. So, excuse me, with the example of like the filibusters, for example, they're a good example because they were known primarily for their aggressiveness and their boarding, and they would always be brace of pistols, things they carried, so all that stuff. Like, so I make sure, okay, these guys are going to be like really good at combat, but they were also influenced by the buccaneers, who were heavy marksmen, so they're going to be decent at shooting, and they'll probably be, but maybe not so great at saves, because they generally, whenever I would read an account, they would want to just come in and just break you. But if you generally resisted and they weren't able to break you at first, they'd kind of fall apart a lot of times, right? And that would be how they'd lose. So I say, okay, so maybe the saves aren't amazing, especially in combat. But they also seem to be pretty tough, so maybe good resolve. Not the best, but not the worst, so right in the middle. So, and you just kind of get those stats and those things, and then any kind of really unique trait, like the fast reload on Buccaneers, where we learned that one thing they do often, they were early adopters of cartridges, paper cartridges, so they would usually reload that way, which is going to increase their reload time. Yeah. But what they do sometimes is they'd just kind of load the gun, and instead of ramming it down, they just bang it on the ground a couple of times, pick it up and shoot. Oh. And they could fire, I don't remember off the top of my head now, but maybe like 5 shots in a minute, which is incredibly fast for the time, Yeah. So that's where the fast read, but they couldn't do that consistently because start to foul the barrel, they're going to have to run something down. Yeah. So that's why we made it on just a spade. So basically, it kind of just shows that they're reloading consistently and little things like that. So, and that's pretty much how we designed the units. Yeah, that's actually really interesting. Okay, so let's say you've got your new unit. Right. They're now going on to the tabletop. They're starting to work the way you want them. And then you're playtesting them. So what would you think makes for a good playtester? Because I'm sure you probably have like a little dedicated group that you generally head to in Miami, yeah? Yeah. Well, first of all, as somebody who plays, that's always a good start. That's sort of hard to get sometimes, which is understandable. People get excited, they want to help, but then they've this is not their job. They've got lives to live, and they maybe don't have that much time to play. But if somebody going to go to a con and have someone just walk up to the booth, exactly. So it's somebody who gets the chance to play consistently is often the best, even if they're maybe not. They don't maybe get certain things, but just they can just give you raw information, like I played and this happened, and I can pick something up that's maybe happening in my own games or something. Yeah. So just the fact playing is the biggest thing. Like even if they're really astute and they play one game, they've got a lot of great observations. That's just one game. Yeah. But if they can give me a bunch of games, that's really where the key is. So if a bunch of games are played and this one thing keeps happening and it really shouldn't happen this way, that's really the best information you can get. But aside from that, the best thing is it's just guys who kind of get the balance and the math of things, right? So they can kind of see, they can pick up real quick before they even play, like, I'm concerned about this. Like, they'll look at something you've done and you've kind of got, some maybe, you're not really seeing it clear because you're kind of caught up in how the coolness, this is cool to do this or that. And maybe, this rule may be a little bit too complicated or something. Stuff like that. Guys who are just sharp and pick up things, have a lot of gaming experience. So if they can, a lot of times right off the bat, identify issues. That's always great, because then you kind of look at it, you're like, yeah, he's probably right. I mean, I'll try it once just to make sure, but it's like, it's going to be a little tough. So those are the two, but really those two things are very cool. The most crucial. All right. Next up would be, all right, here's one for you. So we know you've added a ton of factions in the new book, but whenever you're picking out those factions from history and deciding will they be standalone or will they be like folded into another faction, how do you go through that process? How do you decide who's going to be, the big star players and who's going to be, more, there'll be less of these guys, so let's put them in with, say, like the Unaligned. Right. So sometimes it's, so the way we do it is we'll have nationalities, and within nationalities we have factions, right? So typically it's pretty clear most of the time what nationality something's going to fall into, right? So like Dutch privateers are obviously not going to be in the Spanish, so that part's easy. But some of the where we run into that is sub-factions within the factions, right? So for example, the Spanish, one of my favorite ones is the Spanish guerrillas, right, which represents kind of like Native Americans and free Africans, and then poor regular Spaniards, and they're kind of like not the best equipped guys, but they know the land. A lot of them are hunters, and they can they're pretty sneaky and they're a lot of fun to play. So that would be a different force than a typical militia, right? So instead of originally that was going to be its own faction, but then I realized it's a lot of the same rules and a lot of the same things. So instead, we just made it a sub-faction option where you could just say, okay, if you choose this option, it kind of just alters some of your core unit choices.
Yeah.
And that's now it's the same faction but with a new option instead of having to make a whole new section in the book and take up space. So that's generally how we do it. Typically, once I start building it, if I see that it's really similar to this other faction, and it's just got a couple minor differences, I'll generally just kind of slide it in there as a sub-faction.
And is there much of the historical consideration that has to go into that as well? Say you put a faction and then a sub-faction.
Right.
Would you generally try and keep it that maybe those factions may have fought together at some point, or is that something different?
So, yeah, in a way. So that would be that's why in those factions sometimes you'll lose an option, right? So you see, like, okay, these guys become core units, but you can't take this unit.
I
right?
see.
So that's the main change.
Yeah, so you've got trade-off.
So we do have that historical consideration. And also on the reverse of that is if something is very different geographically or something, right? So if you have, for example, we have North American and then Caribbean militia in a lot of instances, right? And those would be, even though they're pretty similar, they're going to have the same special rules. Because they're different enough geographically and stuff, that we'll change it. We'll make them separate so they're not the same thing.
Cool. All right. The next question then is, whenever you first came to create the game, what were the key things you wanted to put on the tabletop mechanics-wise? Because, I mean, Blood and Plunder does play very differently to a lot of other games out there. So where did the inspiration come from for some of those main mechanics, like the DAX, the movement, the shooting stats, things like that?
So the main thing was, for me, I like games that are tactical, that are going to force tough choices, that are going to keep you thinking and keep you guessing. Very chess match like, okay, I could do this or I could do that, and you have just tons of choices, and the game hangs on these little decisions, right? And to me, that makes for an exciting, interesting game. So that was paramount for me. That's the thing that's most important. So I wanted to do something like that, and then to make a game that was as simple and playable as possible at the same time. And also combine land and sea, which all those things were a challenge to get all three of those cornerstones in place. So that was the main thing. So we wanted to make sure that I like games like Bolt Action and Muskets and Tomahawks, where they have kind of a random initiative. You kind of don't know who's going to go. So I enjoyed that aspect. I never have liked any kind of initiative system where it's just a random thing, especially when the initiative is huge, right? So like an I Go, You Go game where it's like, oh, I'm going first, and here's my alpha strike, So I wanted there to be some control on the player side, but the card hand made it so that, okay, now you don't know what card you're going to get. So I've got these cards, I don't know what he's got, I got to make this choice. So maybe if I try to burn a faster card in the beginning, right? But maybe if his card's faster and I don't have a lot of other faster cards, now I'm behind the whole turn if I want to go first. But if I know I got, maybe I don't have any spades and I've got hearts, but he doesn't have a lot of cards, maybe I could say, I could gamble with this heart, maybe I'll go first. Yeah. But if I save it and he plays a spade, and then on the next hand, I'm likely to go first. Yeah. So a lot of those choices are pretty huge, and and I think they abstractly really represent the sort of decisions a commander would make on the field. So, and then it just all goes down from there. I wanted to make sure all the units had a lot of flavor and character. Sometimes historical games, they kind of lack that, I think. Not all of them, but some of them do. It's just a soldier is a soldier is a soldier. And this is a better soldier, this is a worse soldier. Yeah. But there's not a ton of... Yeah, they're a little bit faceless. Yeah, there's not a ton of national flavor or even unit flavor. And stuff. So we wanted to make sure that was a thing too, where that's where you get the special rules and the various stats and things like that. So. Yeah, well, two of my favorite mechanics that you have built into the game. Number one is the fortune point system. For me, I love it because it lets me say, this should have really happened, but it didn't, so let's try that one more time. Right. Once more with feeling. The other one would be the actual way that you've done the commanders. Them having a command point, it feels to me like, they're shouting across the battlefield to get someone to do something extra. So I do love that aspect to it as well. Right, final question then. Sure. And this is the biggie. All right. It's the biggie because I'm sure everyone out there is wondering what in the hell it's going to do. So how far can Blood and Plunder go? So
what sort of eras can you work your way up to at the end of this project? Because you're working through history, so you're advancing your timeline. So how far can you go with that?
So we could go pretty far. I think Blood and Plunder would handle everything up to about American Civil War pretty well. My current plan is to go as far as the Seminole Wars, which is just right before the Civil War, right? Definitely at least the War of 1812, and some conflicts like that. So one of the things I'm most excited about doing is the American Revolution period. And within that, you also have the Haitian Revolution, which I don't think anybody's made a war game about.
Ooh, interesting.
And all the South American revolutions and a bunch of stuff like that. There's definitely a lot of cool stuff that's not really been touched upon in a lot of games. That once the game's more established and we can kind of get the extra resources to do those more fringe things, I'm looking forward to doing a lot of stuff like that.
Cool.
I mean, the American Revolution's been done a lot, but not. I think maybe Muskets and Tomahawks is the only game I could really think of that's done like a unit-based kind of skirmish that really focuses on that style of combat. But we'll have the added advantage of all the privateering engagements and stuff like that happened, and there was a lot. I mean, the Americans were fighting the British all over the place, and they had tons of privateers. I mean, they were outfitting privateers, whereas like these guys were in a small sloop with like 8 guys aboard, like 1 musketeer, and that's it, you know. So it's some pretty cool little skirmishes, and then there's also the opportunity to go back, right? And then the 16th century, something I'd like to do eventually, where with Drake and all the French corsairs in the New World and stuff like that. And then, of course, you could just go beyond the New World. So Blood and Plunder has a lot of opportunities, and we're going to just keep designing stuff for it until, you know, people don't care anymore.
Okay.
So,
Well, there's one for you. It just occurred to me. So, with you working your way through the centuries and stuff,
right.
Eventually some of the nations are going to be like dropping out of the conflict.
Right.
So, depending on which era you're fighting in, will we actually see that? Okay, so if you're going to be fighting this era, you're going to drop off this faction, because they wouldn't have been fighting here now?
So the way we're going to do that, and that's already kind of been planned out, if you're just playing a friendly pickup game, you can play whatever you want, right? So let's say we do some samurais against some buccaneers, right? Sure, you can do that. The rules will work.
Okay, you're making samurai. This is great.
Well, I didn't say that. But it could be a thing, but I'm just saying, let's say.
Yeah.
But anyway, maybe. But so, however, what we're gonna do is we're gonna introduce a system where kind of like, okay, you can basically put a date on things. So if you're having an event, a tournament, whatever, right? You can say, so let's play within this date range, and then you can also lock it down to a region, right? So if you want to say, if you want to do King William's War, you're gonna say, okay, so pretty much anything North American and within the late 17th century, and then that'll work, and you can do that.
Cool. All right. Well, Mike, thank you very much. I think we've covered everything I wanted to here. It's always great to hear what's planning and what's going on inside that head of yours. Everybody, I tell you what, if you have any questions about Firelock, Firelock Games and Blood and Plunder, get them in the comments below. We will move on. We will see you again very soon.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now, and be sure to check out beastsofwar.com for the latest gaming news and gaming Let's Plays. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.